I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a very upsetting resolution passed by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. UNESCO now formally does not recognize a Jewish connection to some of the most important historic Jewish sites in Eretz Yisrael. I want to say that again. UNESCO, the educational, scientific, and cultural arm of the United Nations, does not recognize the Western Wall or the Temple Mount to have a Jewish connection. And from now on, UNESCO will only call the Temple Mount the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif, and will now call the Western Wall the Al-Barak Plaza. UNESCO also condemns Israel's presence in East Jerusalem as an occupying power and condemns Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and actually accuses Israel of planting fake Jewish graves in Muslim cemeteries and of manufacturing Jewish synagogues and mikvahs, ritual baths, in Islamic and Byzantine archaeological sites. The UNESCO resolutions also refer to the cities of Hebron and Bethlehem as solely Muslim, and criticize Israel for its claiming a Jewish connection to the Cave of Machpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs, and to Rachel's tomb, both of which, of course, are in Hebron. There is something surreal, isn't there, in these UNESCO resolutions? Something surreal. Who would ever have believed that a United Nations organization would one day sever the Jewish historical connection to the land of Israel that goes back thousands of years, and for which there is concrete archaeological evidence? Hebron was the original Jewish capital, ruled by King David, before King David built the city of Jerusalem as his new capital, which then became the historic capital of the Davidic kingdom, revered by Jews from the 10th century BCE to this very day. 16 centuries before Mohammed was even born. 16 centuries before there was an Islam. It's surreal. Now, what's it all mean for the Jewish world and for the world at large today? For some answers and perspective, I'm so pleased to be joined once again by Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Malcolm, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
It's always my pleasure to be with you, regardless of how difficult the circumstances. It's good to talk to you.
Yes. So, Malcolm, what do you make of these UNESCO resolutions?
Well, I think they are very significant, and you properly outlined them. And you may recall that I raised this in an interview with you at least 6 months, maybe 9 months ago already.
Yes.
And I've been trying to get people to pay attention to this because this is a process that has been going on for years. And 2 years ago, or maybe 3, they met in Amman under the auspices of ISESCO, which is the Islamic Society for Economic and Social whatever. 42 countries came together with the participation of a representative of UNESCO. And there we saw beginning this idea of supplanting what has been universally accepted for thousands of years. The names of the holy sites, whether it was the Wailing Wall and Western Wall and Kotel, referring to the wall in Jerusalem and the plaza in front of it, the Rachel's tomb, which for 3,000 years in every Arab document and every Muslim document was called Kutab Rachel, Rachel's tomb, and the Cave of the Patriarchs. And turning them all into hyphenated names, meaning Al-Burak's Wall / Western Wall, Kutab Rachel / Mosque of Muhammad's driver, even though Muhammad never visited the area in his lifetime, but is by their belief, ascended from the Temple Mount after his death, together with Al-Burak, his horse. and the Cave of Machpelah being a mosque. Now they've taken it another step where they've dropped the traditional names and only refer to it as Muslim by their Muslim names, which means that you have eradicated the entire Judeo-Christian heritage of thousands of years. This is not just about Jews. It denies the fundamental beliefs of Western society and the accepted culture of Judeo-Christian tradition for thousands of years. And more than that, it is a reflection of the fact that they are trying to take away our past, to take away our future. And now we've had a further development, which is the vote at UNESCO that you referred to. It was their executive council, but countries like France, India, Russia voted for this resolution. Now, France, under pressure and from both from the community and from outside, we've written to them and talked to them. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister have renounced this resolution, said it was inappropriate, the vote should never have taken place. We are pressing that it be rescinded. Even the head of UNESCO, who is a candidate to be Secretary General of the United Nations to succeed Ban Ki-moon, came out right away against it. The United States obviously opposed it, but only with a handful of countries. The bulk voted for it. A few abstained. And it is just a complete fiction, contradiction of history, of fact. And yet we see how the United Nations has succumbed to the pressure, the one-sided pressure, the biases which had been so in evidence. You know, that in 2015 there were 20 UN resolutions against Israel, 3 for the rest of the world. In 2014, 20 against Israel, 4 for the rest of the world. Human Rights Council passes 5 or 6 resolutions this year condemning Israel, with Iran, Syria, Iraq, all these countries sitting in judgment of Israel, the one democracy, and they are not even the subject of any inquiry. Israel's the only one with a special item. The Commission of Women in the United Nations singles out one country, which has more women in its Knesset and its government per capita than any of them. And this is true in virtually every agency. We see this pattern now, the Palestinians applying to Interpol for membership, applying in other bodies, and that the United Nations bias, bigotry has become so evident, and this taking countries with the most appalling records in human rights to sit in judgment of a country that simply trying to exist and live by democratic rules. It violates every principle on which the United Nations was founded, and we have started a nationwide petition drive to oppose it. And any of your viewers who want to join it can contact our office. Just write to conferenceofpresidents.org, and we will or go to our website, and you will see ways to sign up on this nationwide petition drive.
Excellent. You know, Malcolm, I understand that there is sort of virulent anti-Israel sentiment in the United Nations, among certain nations, and we've seen this horrific rise of anti-Israel, anti-Zionist movements in Western Europe, which are in some way simply anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Israel. But this is a cultural arm of a world body which is acting as if history doesn't matter. It's, you know, like saying one day there never was a Revolutionary War. There never was a Civil War. There never was a George Washington. There never was a Congress. It's just like saying it just didn't happen. And I'm just amazed that this kind of warped thinking and action can have any kind of international sanction. And you've been watching this, as you said, you've talked about this before on JBS, but you've got to have some sense of where it's coming from. So it's not only what does it mean, but Malcolm, where does this come from? And how is there not worldwide academic and cultural and governmental outrage everywhere on it would respond to this kind of vilification of Jewish history?
Well, it seems that the world can't find the strength or the voice to express outrage when it comes to Israel. And Israel is singled out. I gave some of the pattern of discrimination that is annual, that is constant, that is ongoing. But I think implicit in your comment is that people tend to dismiss the UN. Shmum, they say, it's not important, it's not significant. It is very significant.
Yes.
It creates a record. Future generations will look back and will find that they passed a resolution on Zionism, racism. Maybe some will even notice that they repealed it. But the infrastructure of what we're seeing goes back to that. It goes back even to 1948, when the State of Israel was created. They created special bodies dealing with the Palestinians that exist until today. They are a single-focused agencies of the UN whose only job is to get up every morning and find out how they can smear Israel, how they can slam Israel, creating fictions, creating the kind of actions that we have seen. And certainly the Zionism racism resolution, while it was repealed, the poison still runs within the system. And it's augmented by Arabs, some propaganda out of Arab states. It comes from others, or the Russians, during the era of the communists certainly promoted it, as they did the Zionism racism resolution in their anti-Zionist drive. And we saw it at Durban, and we saw it at the conferences in Durban and in Mexico, et cetera. So it runs deep and wide within the UN body politic. It becomes an easy scapegoat. They denounce anti-Semitism, but at the same time they promote it. And people say, well, this is different than anti-Semitism. When you single out one country because it is a Jewish state, and when you question the right of that state to have the standing of every other country in the United Nations, when one country's credentials are challenged every year, even though it is sanctified by 3,000 years of blood, of sweat, of tears. Last week we marked Israel's Memorial Day. And remember, almost 25,000 young people gave their lives, and old others, in the defense of the Jewish state so it could exist. And here you see this effort. It is rooted in anti-Semitism, in the singling out of Israel, not because of a policy difference, which could be legitimate. You could discuss differences over any particular government or policy. This is about Israel's right to exist.
Exactly. Now, what impact will it have? We've described how really ugly, it's just ugly, and it is anti-Semitism. The question is, will it have a practical effect? And it's not about whether future generations will look back. You're absolutely right. But I want to know about today. Will it have any impact practically, or as ugly as this is this purely symbolic?
No, it's much more than symbolic, even though that would be significant enough.
Right.
It is more than symbolic when you erase the history, because if we have no roots there, what right do we have to be there in the future? What right does the Jewish state have to exist? But it could lead to measures taken to ban Jews from any of these holy places, to say, look, the United Nations recognize that there is no Jewish tie, there is no Christian tie to this. This is simply a Muslim, an Islamic religious site, and therefore could limit the rights further. And even if you look at the history of the Temple Mount since Israel took it in 1967, when they reunited Jerusalem almost 50 years ago, if you look at the history, the fact is that Israel has restricted the rights of Jews and expanded the rights of Muslims, giving the Waqf control over it, and the reward is that they've desecrated the place, that they've destroyed it, and now tried to take exclusive control. So it can have very practical implications and on-the-ground implications, I would say, beyond the spiritual, religious, cultural, scientific, propagandistic impact.
Exactly. It undermines the very rationale of the State of Israel. And, there's something ironic here. We all celebrated, no matter how old we are, whether we did it at the time or whether we do it now in retrospect, we celebrated the fact that it was the United Nations which in essence endorsed and affirmed the League of Nations decision to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine. It was the United Nations decision in 1947, which in essence expressed world opinion that said, yes, the Jews have a right to go home, and we will help them establish a Jewish polity in Eretz Yisrael, which was at that time called Palestine, a part of what was the Ottoman Empire. Now we, flash forward to 2016, and your point is it's not just 2016. This has been a movement for many years now in the United Nations, and the United Nations is so hostile to the state of Israel that you've heard it said, Malcolm, if the vote were taken today about a partition of Palestine, it would fail, and that ultimately the United Nations would say that this should become a Muslim Islamic land and the Jews have no right to be there. What is your attitude? What would your advice be to those who argue now the United Nations is no longer a body that merits American support or Jewish support, and that in essence there should be a stand taken now, Jewishly and in terms of American democracy, against the United Nations?
Well, this is a very complex issue, as you know, and the revulsion about the United Nations should be expressed. We work closely with Congress. They have taken steps, including defunding American participation in UNESCO, which also means that the United States doesn't have the same voice in UNESCO, but I think that the step was taken when they recognized and admitted a Palestinian state, so to speak, as a member, which violates laws passed by Congress, and the cutoff was automatic. And the impact is very severe because America pays almost a quarter of the dues of the United Nations, and removing that funding. Pulling out of the United Nations altogether, I think, as many people propose, is not realistic. It's not in the cards. But to send the message and to say that we're going to defund and we are obligated to fund any agency that violates the congressional law, and to see more pressure brought to bear. If the other countries who give almost nothing in dues, and if you have an automatic majority, so you have with the non-aligned movement, you have the Organization of Arab States and Islamic States, Islamic countries, so you have big blocks. Any measure that comes up virtually automatically means that Israel will be condemned and Israel will be criticized. And at the same time, we have seen some changes. That Yom Kippur was recognized this year on the calendar as a result of a joint Israeli-American initiative, and that Israel only a few years ago was admitted to a regional grouping, to the WEOG, West European and other grouping, because they couldn't be in the Middle East grouping, which is very critical because UN rights and stuff are granted on that basis, and Israel will even compete for a seat on the Security Council as a member of to get one of the seats allocated to WEOG on the Security Council in a couple of years. But the system as a whole is oriented in a way that sets Israel up to fail. And it doesn't matter what Israel does. Israel's humanitarian aid, Israel's participation in a lot of places. There are Israelis in positions, and not top positions, but important positions in some regard, in some agencies, contributing to the effort on the World Health Organization and so many other places, which does not get recognition and doesn't get saluted at the United Nations. So it's our job, all of us, to keep hammering away, and that's why this petition is one step, but the goal of the petition is to make a worldwide uproar and to highlight the hypocrisy and the single focus on condemning Israel. You look at all of the people, the tens of thousands of Christians who have been killed, the Muslims, the Yazidis, the others, and nothing.
Right.
Virtually nothing.
Right. Well,
Israel, which is teaching people how to have post-harvest reclamation, treating Syrians in their hospitals, people from Gaza, including the leaders of Hamas, send their families to hospitals in Israel. They condemn them for over cement, which is being used to build tunnels and rocket launchers. And Israel puts 1,000 trucks a day go into Gaza. Nobody talks about those things.
Right. I give you enormous credit. I hope everybody understands that you are trying to champion a Jewish response to the hideous nature of not simply the United Nations resolutions, but anti-Semitism throughout Europe. And, thankfully, it's not. American Jews do not experience it. I'm always concerned, Malcolm, that American Jews, especially those who have are on the periphery, are going to be influenced themselves, are going to feel in some way threatened. And I'm trying to figure out how to frame a question I want to ask you. It's not like you and I worry that tomorrow the Jewish people are going to come to an end. Last week we celebrated the 68th anniversary of the State of Israel, which is a miracle and is a true beacon. It is a light unto the nations. At the same time, there are people who worry for the future of not the State of Israel, the Jewish people as a whole, because the anti-Semitism that we thought once died at the end of the Holocaust has also seen a resurrection that is breathtaking. So my question for you is, in the privacy of your own moments, Malcolm, how much do you worry for the future of the Jewish people over the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years?
About 20 hours a day. And let me try to answer the different parts of what you've said, because I believe that the Jews and the Jewish people will be eternal. I believe God's promise will be upheld. I believe Israel is stronger today in many respects than it ever was. There is no country today that can do damage to Israel, but nobody that can destroy Israel, as you once had alliances. When you see Egypt today as essentially an ally working with Israel in the Gaza and in many other areas, you see Syria has collapsed. There are threats. Hezbollah is a threat. Hamas is a threat. They're not existential threats, but they can do a lot of damage, and Hezbollah with 100,000 missiles can do a great deal. But Israel is strong, and the U.S.-Israel alliance in the military and security and other areas is very strong, and it is a mutual relationship because of the importance that Israel holds for the United States, as certainly the United States does for Israel. But I am very concerned, and I think we have to be honest that the things that are happening in Europe, the return of the isms that we thought had been relegated to the dustbin of history,
yes,
that the New World Order of the 21st century looks more like Old World disorder.
Yes.
It looks more like the 19th century than the 21st century.
Yes.
But I think it's a mistake to think that America is immune to it. And, we say it's over there, but it is here. And I see every day, it's not just what we get reports of anti-Semitism on campuses. And even if it's a minority of the people, the fact is that it's increasingly acceptable, that things that would not have been said, after the Holocaust, anti-Semitism was not politically correct. Well, today in classrooms and universities and campuses, the demonstrations, they might use Israel as the corporate Jew, as the collective Jew as a target, because you can't just say I hate Jews, but you can certainly say I hate Israel.
Yes.
And not because of a policy difference. That's one. Two, in communities all across the country, we hear reports of incidents that take place, of anti-Semitic manifestations. We should not believe that any society is immune to it. B'chol dar v'dor, we said at the Passover Seder a few weeks ago, in every generation, enemies arise that seek to destroy us. And it uses the present tense to remind us that every generation faces the threats, and sometimes it's not as blatant, sometimes it's just boiling up beneath the surface and then explodes. But having been in last week in Poland and the March of the Living and learning the lessons again and talking to survivors, people who did not believe that it would happen to them, who did not think that the threats could be realized. And as a warning to us, the reason we do the March of Living, the reason we focus is not because we enjoy dwelling on the tragedies of the past. It's because we want to spare future generations these trials and tribulations. That the importance of history is about the future for us.
Yes.
And that is why your question is so important, because people, I understand the defense mechanisms, and they say, oh, this is gloom and doom if you dare warn them about things that have happened. If you remember all the discussions about the things that we talked about, that I know people don't want to hear, when we warned about the danger of Islamic fundamentalism 20 years ago, or about Iran 18 years ago, and all of the things, and they say, oh, it's all doom, it's negative. No, it's reality, and we cannot afford, especially now, to ignore reality because we want to hide behind some sort of fictionalized vision of the world. These are real challenges, real dangers. We have real allies. What enables me to go on is because I see how many friends we can have. You know, we just came from this events with the Hispanic community, with other communities. We see how in the Middle East today, Arab leaders I meet with talk about Israel in a totally different way. There's a new alliance with Greece and Cyprus and a Mediterranean initiative where other countries are coming together with Israel as the hub. And Israel has so much to offer to them, and now with the new energy discoveries. So I want people, as we just finished this commemoration of Israel's Independence Day last week and Memorial Day, and we're heading now towards Shavuot, this is a period where the one theme that permeates it all is Zachor, remember.
Yes.
The word for Yom HaShoah, it's the word for those who died. It was the message of Pesach, it's the message of Shavuos. Mm-hmm. Is to learn the lessons, is to be reminded of what our priorities must be. It's to rededicate ourselves. And we can't let the enemy wear us down. We can't let them define our agenda. We have to do it, and we have to do it in an assertive way. And whether it's the UN or any particular government or any movement, this is the time, and we will be held to account for it.
Amen v'amen. But you know, you're my first love, Malcolm. What you do is extraordinary, and I'm thrilled that you were able to explain it the way you do. I want you to take 30 seconds one more time. Tell people who are watching right now, what can they do if they go to the Conference of Presidents website?
Well, in a day or so, the website will have, or will have already, hopefully, the petition to the United Nations, which we are asking people not just to sign, but to circulate. This is not just for the Jewish community. They can also sign up for our Leadership Action Network, where we will send them periodically an action recommendation with talking points, all digested for them. They should get the dailyalert.org, sign up for that, so that every morning they get in the computers before 9 o'clock the information of that day from all published sources identified, and we will keep them posted on other developments, other programs, and things that they can help address the issues we've talked about. Superb.
Again, no one says it better than you, and no one is doing as much as you. And there are many wonderful people in the Jewish world today who are also trying to sustain and build Jewish life. But Malcolm, what you do is Herculean, and I am so proud to be your friend. And I can't tell you how much it's meant to me that you've supported what we're doing here at JBS. But Kol Tuva Hatzlacha, you've got to come into studio very soon. There's so many other things I wanted to talk to you about, but this at the moment, this whole discussion is crucial at this moment in time. So I thank you for it, Malcolm, and we'll see each other very, very soon.
It'll be my pleasure to come in, and thank you. And as you know, I'm not only a verbal supporter, I think I speak about it, that having this vehicle, JBS, be strong and be able to expand its broadcast is critical as we face these issues.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Be well.
The thoughts of Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Sign up for the Daily Alert. Go to the Conference of Presidents website. My thanks again to Sloan Copeland, Serge Goldberg, to our Associate Director, Dara Golub, and the producer of this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.